us will navigate, happen and become the best and elevate. Oh yeah, rising above, reaching for the sky, unlocking potential we won't deny. In the sweet spot, we'll pave the way, transform the leaders day by day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the Sweet Spot with IT leaders. Share the insights with other leaders and others that want to lead. My name is Carlos Vargas, and as every week, I have my two co-hosts, Howard Holton and Paul Lewis.
Hello, hello.
So how much time do you spend doing that with your eyes closed so that when I'm mouthing it, it doesn't distract you and you don't laugh?
I actually, so
You just look at the camera.
I actually have to look at the light in the camera so I know that, because I'm like, I see you when you start like a little bit. I'm like, okay, he's gonna do it. So.
I told you I did that on an airplane once, right? I was on a Southwest flight and I did it on an airplane. And so the flight attendant said, okay, smartass, you do it then. So I stood up and did it. And she was like, oh my God, you really do have the whole thing memorized. And I was like,
In
yeah.
the mic?
Well, she didn't have a mic.
Oh,
She was Southwest stands at the front of the plane and in the middle of the plane. And they go through it. So
and it's a recorded kind of deal happening?
No,
right?
she just says it.
Oh, I see. Really?
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah, at the time. Yeah.
I don't fly Southwest to appreciate it.
It's
Air Canada has a video in front of you. Just watch the video.
right. United is similarly designed.
American.
I do like that they say, please pay attention to this because even if you're a frequent flyer, all airplanes are different. But the video is exactly the motherfucking same.
Right. You don't think they insert a
Nope.
airplane
Not
specific?
once, not even once. Not even one damn time.
It's a cutscene.
That's why it annoys me. Like if they did that, okay, cool. Like I'll give it to you. At least there's something different there. But no, it's been exactly the same every time I've flown.
The plane look the same. The steward is the same.
How many different planes could Southwest actually have?
Well, this is, I mean, Southwest, United, pick. They can only have 4 or 5 different airframes.
Right.
That being said, like if you take the 767, right?
Yep.
Very common airframe, they'll have 40, 50 different layouts of the plane. You can custom order the plane to lay out however you want. So theoretically, I guess United could have 15 or 16 different configurations that they use.
Right.
Maybe 40 configurations across all the different airframes. So they could, in fact, have a few different options. And since we live in a digital world, they could also have it, have some system that's specific as part of the configuration that based on the plane that you're at and its configuration, it plays the correct video.
Right.
But they don't do that.
No. Live.
They just insult your intelligence.
So let me ask you a question. When we go to learn or to interact with other people at conferences, the whole idea is that you're listening to a story. So you can try to get the meaning or whatever the speaker is trying to communicate. But sometimes some people are just focused on the wrong things. Some people are more interested in the colors of the presentation instead of what they're gonna share. What do you think about that?
I really try to be present when I'm in a session, especially a keynote. In fact, for the most part, I only attend the keynotes. But in addition, I may also attend some of the the special sessions. I really honestly try to pay attention. I really honestly try to focus on the content being spewed at me so that I can bring it into my noggin, appreciate its value, apply it into my world or to my customer's world or to my partner's world. But it's not as easy as it sounds because I find myself being slightly judgy, not on the screen imagery, because for the most part, that's usually pretty professionally produced, but on the presenter and or the content the presenter is presenting. And especially recently, I'm finding myself being distracted by either the style or the speech pattern or the lack of movement.
You mean the fact that they're bad at their job?
Yeah, right.
If your job is to get on stage
Yeah.
You should treat it like everything else, right? Could you imagine if the same people that got on stage treated the rest of their job as poorly as they did the stagecraft?
Right.
Right? Like you're paid to be on stage, but you're also a CTO. So is your code just as sloppy? Is your
Right.
strategy just as bad? Right?
Now, big conferences make the mistake of bringing on the CEO and the COO and the CMO, all the CXOs, because the assumption is they have interesting, valid things to say when they're generally not prepared for an audience of like that.
No, and again, right? When it comes to the list of responsibilities they have, they feed stagecraft not enough,
Right.
right?
So go a little bit deeper in that, Howard, because I know you have perfected what you do, and Paul also. How does a leader start perfecting it? Because I know that that's something very important, because it's different from giving a presentation, let's say in camera, or what we used to do in a conference room to be on stage.
It's different, but I don't think it's that different. You know what I mean? Like it's different to work on camera versus work on in the theater, right? So doing TV and film is different than doing stagecraft, but it's not that different. It's not so different that you have to relearn everything when you step off of one and step into the other, right? Yes, for sure. If you're doing TV and film, there are cue cards. You can read right from them.
Right. You can take multiple takes.
Correct. You can go, oops, I messed that up. Matter of fact, I was recording a training deck a couple hours ago. I must have made 50 mistakes. Right? I'm working from a script in that case. 50 mistakes. The only time I ever work from a script is I'm recording training material that must match slides.
Right.
The rest of the time it's extemporaneous. Like I don't have a script. Even when I stand up on stage, I don't have a script. Why would I use a script? That seems silly. I actually
find it almost impossible to record something by myself in my office and hope that I could get through it in under 10 times. It's almost impossible. I kind of need an audience. Even if it's just one or two people that are producing with me, I can't. I am too judgy of my own content. And any one slip up of the tongue, I stop the recording and restart the entire presentation.
Do you start all the way from scratch?
Yeah, I'll stop it completely. I might even close the meet just out of frustration.
No.
Reopen the meet again.
Okay.
And
I start from the bullet point, maybe if it's early, the slide itself.
I see.
But I'm not restarting
the production crew can.
Oh, the production crew is good. That's their job.
Sew it together.
They sew it together with some problem. Like I'm not gonna lie, right? There have been some times where I talk kind of fast, right? And so I didn't leave enough of a break and made it a little bit hard for them. But they still make it work. They still get it together.
Yeah.
We need to talk, guys, because there's tools for that. You don't even have to do that. But yeah. So
but there's other things the production team really focuses on that the AI tools can't do, right? Like if I say, okay, this slide is fundamentally the same as the one that I did in this recording, just take the audio from that and place it over. AI is not going to do that. Not yet. We may get there, but it isn't doing that yet.
And yeah, I could have it run through. I could just make the mistake and then just restart the slide and just go ahead. But it's almost like I don't want to burden the production team with sloppiness.
That's funny.
Clearly, I said the wrong word, and now I feel like an ass. So I'm just gonna throw it away. And
so I had a 2-hour block to record this thing. It took 1 hour and 48 minutes of actual recording time, like click record and go, without doing what you said.
Right.
And this was the only block that I will have for the next 45-ish days.
Right.
Right. And initially,
so you're under extra pressure, is what you're saying.
I just don't have time. It's not pressure. I don't feel pressured. Like pressure is something you should feel. I simply don't have time. There's just not another block of time that I could use. Right. Therefore, it has to be done. And so, I get it done. Also, when I do things like that, it's flushed. It doesn't stay in memory. It goes to the cache that's between my eyes and my mouth and no further.
Right. So likelihood you would repeat it is low. If not,
it's zero. Non-existent.
Right.
It's not designed with that purpose in mind. It's not designed for me to repeat the training on stage. Were I to do it on stage, the focus would be on Howard's commentary, not on the script.
Right. Howard's commentary on Howard's script.
Well, kind of, yes.
So what will be the difference then when you think about what you guys are seeing in some of the events that they're getting this that you guys are getting distracted? Are they not covering the topic? Are they just wandering everywhere else?
They make it about themselves. So when the CEO gets on stage, the CTO, the CMO, the founders, right? When they get on stage, they believe they're the attraction, not the content.
Okay.
And therefore, it's almost like the content is secondary to them. The story is secondary to them. They think that what they say, no matter what they say, is amazing, when in fact, that's a huge gap and a problem. Because while there might be 15% of the audience that knows who they are, and 5% that is actually, fans of this particular CEO or CTO, the vast majority of the audience is not. They probably have never seen them before. It's the first time they've been to this particular conference. They might be aware of the technology, the tools, the product, whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
But they're clearly not aware of Joe Smith that's up on stage and has been doing this for 30 years. Who knows, right?
It's also weird because every single one of them, when they do their events, hire a personality.
Right.
Guys, if you were that big of a get, you wouldn't need to hire the personality.
Right.
Right. The fact is, even at your own events, you hire a personality. You hire a Michael Jordan or a Magic Johnson, both of which Johnson, fantastic public speaker. Right. You hire Shaquille O'Neal, who I will watch speak every single time. You hire a Simon Sinek or somebody like that, right? The fact that you're hiring them means you're not that kind of get. You're not them. So stop pretending that you are.
And then they make it about themselves when they do a panel. So this last one I've been to, there were 2 panels. Panel number 1 was AI centric. So there was a couple academic and sort of journalist AIs. The second one was more celebrity, right? There's a couple actors that were on stage. But the moderators were still the CXOs who still made it in many ways about themselves, which I thought was odd since the panelists in that respect were in fact the experts of both topics, whether that be celebrity and or AI. So in those circumstances, you need to take a step back. Like when I'm doing a panel, I might do an introduction of myself and the panelists, but then every single question, every single interaction is to ensure that they are maximizing their content to the audience. I might interject and add value or add a follow-up question, but it's not about me at that point. It's definitely about them. And the more that I can get them having a conversation, the more audience is going to receive valuable content. But when you're the celebrity CXO, then you think you need equal weight in the panel, which is just doesn't work for an audience. You're not as interesting as the other people that are on the panel. That's kind of what it works out to.
Well, and again, it's not the point.
Right.
Even if you are just as interesting, it's not the point. Right? So put your ego aside and deliver the content. The speaker is always the content. That being said, it's not always interesting if it's just about you.
Right.
Right? It's not interesting. It's not engaging. I know you think you're the most wonderful man in the world, but you're not the most interesting man in the world. That guy works for Dos Equis.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Plus the audience aren't your sycophants, right?
Right.
For the most part, the audience has no idea who you are. They're not the 12 people who report to you, right? They're not your top 100 people in your organization. You're going to receive regular feedback, not abnormal feedback based on the sort of sycophant criteria.
So then the question that I have is, if they are doing it about themselves, is it that they were trying to present that they know about the technology, or that them as person is more important than what their company is sharing or whatever else that they were communicating?
I think it's more the second one than the first one. I think there's a little bit of I'm an expert, which is totally valid and wouldn't be the problem. Right? The problem is they let their own ego get in the way, right? And they feel that they're more interesting than whatever the messages they could be driving, and they never drive the message.
Right.
Right? Like you can be super interesting, you can talk about yourself, but you also have to bring value. And they forget that the fact that you're on stage is not intrinsic value.
Right.
Right? And so they end up effectively spending an hour wasting my time. I'm going to guess Paul feels the same way, because that's how I feel at the end of it, right? Okay, cool. I could have done something else. I'm triple booked. So I took time out of my schedule to watch this thing, and you've wasted it. And now I'm upset. And now actually you've gone down in my mind because you gave me nothing actionable. You gave me nothing insightful. You didn't give me a best practice. You didn't give me a takeaway other than you just wasted an hour of my time. Not the takeaway you probably want.
And you didn't maximize the content of the panel. Like my only expectation of a moderator, regardless of who it is, but especially I guess of a CXO, is that they ask interesting questions. That's my expectation, right? Not superficial questions, because those will always be asked and answered just based on the normal panel, right?
Sure.
But I need you to ask really interesting second and third questions. The double click. You heard something interesting. I need you in real time saying, tell me more about that one specific thing you just said, because that triggered an emotion to me. And I think it triggered the emotion on half of the audience. So tell me more about that thing. Because that you as an audience member do exactly that, right?
Correct.
You hear a 3-minute answer and you're thinking, wow, there was one sentence in there that I really wanted to know more about. You got to be able to hear it and ask it. That's my expectation of a moderator versus I have a list of 20 questions and I have to get through that list of 20 questions in the 44 minutes I have in front of me. That's torturous.
5 questions. You only get 5 questions. What are people thinking? You get 5, not 20. And I would also say the reframe, right? Sometimes the panelist isn't good at giving you a direct answer to the question that's useful to the audience. So as a moderator, you also need to be able to reframe.
Right.
Hey, you said this. What I heard was this. Would you say that's correct? Did I capture the essence of what you were saying?
Right. Or
right.
push them to the actual answer. They didn't actually answer the question.
Right.
So re-ask it again. Yeah, but is it 7 or 8? Yeah, but is it yes or no? Yeah, but do you really think it's true? Right. Really push them, because there was a reason why I asked the question, because the audience wants to know that question, right? They want, or at least you're representing the audience in that world.
Right. So we have mentioned something before, and we use the term echo chamber. But if we're seeing this in several conferences, could it be that they're getting coached to do that? Because I'm like, when someone doesn't know what to do, okay, so we think that they may be getting coached. Is where is that coming from? Because do we see that in TV? Do we see that somewhere else? That they're copying it?
No, they're literally being coached by people who shouldn't be doing that job either. Right?
I think TV does it well, right? When you go into an interview with one of the late night hosts, you do a pre-interview. Let's talk about the 5 or 6 stories that you might want to bring up. But that's where it ends. You don't now get a series of specific questions that they plan on asking and answering. All we're prepared with now is a list of 3, 4, 5 stories to which the host is now going to ask questions based on, and then you can answer or not answer however you wish. And that's the interesting part. But we don't do that. We prepare a list of 20. We give a list of 20. People in their minds now prepare a list of 20 answers. And that becomes a rote panel at that point, which is...
That's boring.
Yeah, it's insufferable.
Terrible.
It's insufferable.
It's terrible.
I hate panels just for that reason. It's way too prepared.
Yep.
It's like when somebody asks me, can you tell me, do you use a teleprompter? I can use a teleprompter. Like, you're reading the whole thing and you're like, look like a robot.
Right.
Again, the only time I can use a script is when I'm doing specific training material.
A script is one thing.
But that's what a teleprompter is a script. And I can't use a teleprompter for the same reason.
I like a script, but I don't have it like it's reading every second. I have it in front of me and I'm trying to be myself as I can do the exact same thing 5 times and it will look completely different.
There was a lot of special sessions that was clearly on stage and clearly recorded. There was teleprompter because you could tell how they were speaking. It was teleprompter. I'm guessing the marketing team put them in that position because it was recorded and they wanted to reuse those assets, and therefore it needed to be closer to perfect than not perfect. But it felt robotic.
Sure. It's also far from perfect because it feels robotic. It feels scripted. It lacks, anything that's close to genuine.
Right.
It's a two-part problem, and I think it's on both sides of the fence, right? I think on one side, I don't think people spend enough time developing that piece of their skill set, as it were, right? Which, by the way, apparently there's this thing called a speaker's agent. I got to find one.
Let's all do it. Let's all sign up.
Yep. And then on the other side, the people for corporate production also have no idea what they're doing. Right. And I don't mean the AV guys that you hire. I mean the people that, for instance, prepare the stuff that goes on the teleprompter.
Right.
Right. And you can always tell because they've not looked at, does the teleprompter deliver the words in the way that you would actually say them?
Right.
Or is it just I can get 23 characters across and 5 lines down, so that's what you get. And
Right,
it's much more the second one.
It'll speed it up or slow it down depending on how you're comfortable.
Right. Which never helps with pacing, which never helps with tone.
No.
Right. There are words that need to be connected that follow each other that have the same space as words that follow each other that don't need to be connected. And yet when they're on a separate line, I have to typewriter. I have to move my eyes this way and then down and back.
I was
They
gonna
should
say
always be
that.
on the same line. Like,
That's how you know when somebody's reading. You see, like the eyes are just moving and like.
well, you don't even need to see the eyes. You can absolutely hear it in their tone. Right.
That too.
So
Right.
we developed this tool for maximizing business continuity, right? Because you now know I went to a separate line.
That's right.
You know those things were supposed to be connected and they're not.
Right.
Versus, you know what I mean? And you can always tell because the speaker notes or the teleprompter is just stream of consciousness style instead of a script,
Right.
which has to be written in the same way that you are to speak it because you will read it out loud.
Right. And maybe I buy that for main stage. Maybe. I don't buy that for sessions. I just can't do it. Even if it's recorded. I'd rather see a flawed recording than a perfect robotic performance.
Oh no, I agree. I don't even like it for main stage. Right?
Well,
like
it's more control. Timing wise, more control.
Nah.
Maybe. I'm not saying all the time, but maybe. If it
give me a clock, I'll nail the clock.
session,
No, give me the clock and I'll nail the clock. It's not a problem.
Right.
I'm good at that now. I'm not. This isn't 5 years ago.
and maybe at 45-minute windows, that's fine. But if you're doing, 5-minute sections, 2.5 to 5 minute sections, and you're getting different people on stage, it's a way more produced, right? Way more timing becomes more relevant.
Sure. But there are ways to deal with that too, right? Give me a 45-minute clock and give me 90 seconds per slide. I'll still nail it.
Right.
It's about being professional and it's about investing your time to understand how to do that. Right. And so, sure, I get 90 seconds per slide. I'm going to use 75 to 105, but it will all average out to 90.
Right.
Because it's just words come out at a certain pace. Like you can't guarantee every slide is going to be exactly 90 seconds. That's ridiculous. Right. But it's really easy to manage if you simply, again, invest in that skill set. You don't have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with it. Carlos doesn't have a problem with it. But we invest in that skill set because we've determined that that is an important thing to do. And too many people who are invited on stage have no clue that that's a skill set they should invest in.
So if you're moderating a panel, how do you prepare your panelists as a general rule?
Depends. I'm doing a panel next week. I'm not preparing them at all.
You're just going to surprise them with the questions.
Yes. In fairness, I have no idea what the panel's on. I'm asked to do a panel, and so I'm going to do a panel. But
do they give you a topic at this?
I don't think so. I think the topic is something like AI.
What do you think?
So let me ask you then a different question. If we're seeing that, is it big conferences, like companies that have like huge environments that are very wide and they bring a lot of people, or also smaller conferences that actually may attract like a specialist persona, smaller crowd? Which one are you seeing?
Both. Like the one that I'm going to this week is tiny, right? It's all C-level executive, big organization kind of people, but it's very small. And then I'll go to one that's 25,000 or 40,000 people. And I see the same problems in all of them. And you
I
can
also see the problems in technical presentations, less so the speaker, because in many ways the audience nor myself have very little expectation that the technologist is, has the stagecraft required. I kind of buy into that. What I don't buy into generally is the prepackaged demonstrations. So I watched several demonstrations in the last couple conferences where there was a lot of prompt engineering, and the prompts that were used came from the clipboard.
right.
And they were showing amazing application development in
Sure.
10-minute sprints. And I had to ask myself, not unlike I guess half of the audience, how long did it take you to figure out those prompts? Because it looked really smooth, the dozen you used to create this 10-minute demonstration, but you're not talking about the 80 hours it took to get to the right prompts to put them in the clipboard.
Sure. And
Right.
and I will say someone should have done that because I've done live Gen AI demos as well. I only come from the clipboard until we get to the Q&A. Like when I do Q&A, then
Yeah.
I'll type. But
Right.
I can't type and talk at the same time. And if I've got to type for 30 seconds, it's dead air, and that's bad.
Sure.
And no one wants to wait what is a cumulative 3 or 4 minutes for me to type what I could paste in 4.5 seconds.
Yeah, it's not the clipboard that I'm concerned about. It's that they're wowing us with how fast I can build an application, not really talking about what it took to get to that point.
Sure. And that's what I mean. They should have talked about that, right? They should have said, hey, like, while you're going to get code output here in 3.5, 4 minutes to build this application, the fact is it did take 8, 10, 12, 40 hours, whatever,
Right.
to find the right prompts and get to the point where it was these specific prompts. Right.
These
And-
prompts
and-
in this order.
Sure. And frankly, what would have been interesting is start the whole conversation that way and then go,
Right.
cool, let's talk about how we got to there.
Right.
Right. Let's talk about
Sounds good.
the lessons that we learned, because that's the beautiful thing. Once I figure out a prompt that works, I don't have to spend 40 hours to create another one. I spend half that time and then half that time again, and then half that time the next time. Right. Until like now, my prompts are pretty damn tight.
Right.
I'm pretty good at getting what I need from Gen AI really, really, really quickly. And it's now to the point where, like, if I use a prompt twice, cool, I create a new application. Right. That has that prompting, that has the basis of that prompt built in. And then I'm not regenerating a prompt, right? But that's what prompt engineering is. Again, it's engineering. So we need to view it just like every other discipline that we do. And I've seen the same thing. And it's like, why did you bury the lead? Like, you didn't even talk about the lead. The lead was, what did you learn to be good at the prompt engineering, not what can Gen AI do? That's 2 minutes of a conversation.
Right.
Here, I did this great thing with Gen AI. Cool. Let's talk about how I got to the point where I could do this thing. And let's talk about how to make that a repeatable lesson, a repeatable skill, a repeatable thing that you do. So it becomes part of your tool belt and not the magic card trick that I showed on stage.
Right. I only have one thing in my clipboard when I do prompt engineering, and it's always the suffix to the prompt, and it's in the voice of Hulk Hogan.
I love in the voice of Hulk Hogan. That's brilliant.
That's my favorite response.
I will say it won't be such a problem now because you can use your voice as the prompt now,
Right.
and that's a whole lot better. So you could actually do that on stage if you wanted. But
In fairness, code looks weird when you use that.
it's true. It's true.
So, what can we do to help the audience to start getting ready? Because, like you
The
mentioned,
audience or the speaker?
well, the audience that is listening to us, our audience,
Our audience.
that are listening to us and say, oh, I definitely was not aware that there was a difference. How can I start getting better so I don't be one of those that when I get on stage, I bore people to death or I go in a tangent that at the end of the day, it doesn't connect with people? What do you think that the audience could do?
So I think I want to preface by saying I am firmly convinced that stagecraft is one of those valuable skills you can have today.
Mhm.
If you're already a good technologist, adding stagecraft makes you exceptionally more valuable.
Right.
Lots of people can work with the tools that we work with every day. Lots of people can. Millions of people can.
Right.
Being able to work with the tools doesn't make you special. Millions of people can get on stage and talk about stuff. Being able to talk about stuff alone doesn't make you valuable.
Mhm.
But if you combine those two things, there's probably 150 to 500 people in the country, in the world, that can do that really well. Right? That have a thorough understanding of technology or whatever the field is, and have the stage presence necessary to carry that to an audience small to large. So I want to preface by saying this is not just, I think you should do it because it's neat or it's interesting or I enjoy it. I think you should do it because it's an extremely valuable tool. So that being said, here are the things that I recommend. Record yourself on Zoom. Use Shakespeare. Use a poem that you like. Listen to someone else do it first, a professional do it first, not the kid down the block, not the high school theater program, but listen to a professional do it. Then do it yourself. Do it until it seems comfortable and it sounds good to you. Then record it and play it for someone who kind of cares about you, a friend or a family member.
Right.
And get them to give you honest feedback and work on iterative improvement. You had a pause there that was weird, or I think you mispronounced this word, or whatever it happened, or don't do the accent. Right?
You're not Scottish. Don't
Right.
pretend you are.
Because you're trying to get down tone and intonation. You're trying to be an engaging speaker, which is about modulating your voice, modulating your speed, modulating your tone, modulating your timbre, right? And finding that kind of place. Don't worry about the content. Use some of the world's best content. It's already been created for you. Worry about your delivery. When you're confident with your delivery, change the content and move out of the comfort zone of this is some of the world's best content, and thus it was made to sound good. And start looking at content that maybe wasn't created to sound good. And as you go through it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, change it until it sounds good. Change it until it flows, and understand how to take poorly written content that was never designed to be spoken out loud and turn it into content that has flow to it, that sounds good, that doesn't make you trip over it and doesn't make you tongue-tied. Paul?
I'm a huge fan of writing your own copy, especially if you're expected to speak it either in stage or in a webinar. It is very difficult to read and speak somebody else's copy because they don't have your voice in mind for the most. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to start from scratch all the time, right? Start from somebody else's copy and modify it, but don't try to do it live, and definitely attempt to go through it before you start the speaking game. My most important, I guess I would have two philosophies. One, you've been an audience member way more than you've been a speaker. So remember all the times you thought it was good and you thought it was bad, and reflect upon that when in fact you're on stage, right? Do that work, because I bet there's a bunch of sessions you didn't enjoy and a bunch of sessions you thought were spectacular. Mental checklist, those things, because that's interesting. That's number one. Number two, just because you're the CXO doesn't mean you should be the star. Especially if your goal of an audience of 5,000 people is actually a combination educate and entertain. And if you're neither an educator nor an entertainer, you are not the person doing it. Amazing if you want to participate as a panelist, participate as, a 5-minute, hey, this is awesome, I think you should buy our stuff. Great. But don't be the moderator. Don't be the MC. Don't be the entertainer and educator. Be the something else until such time as you have that expertise. And when you do get expertise, and there's lots of CXO who has that then jump into it. But the goal isn't to highlight your awesomeness, because while you might be awesome, at least to your sycophants, you're definitely not awesome to the vast majority of the people in the audience who've never heard of you before. Probably couldn't, doesn't know your name in any real way.
Yeah, your job is to make the interview good, which means making the interviewee sound good, right? And sometimes you're working with a rough interviewee.
True.
Right? But everyone still needs to walk away going, wow, that was really engaging and really entertaining. And whoever the interviewee was awesome. That's how you know you did a good job as an interviewer.
Yeah, I've interviewed many people who've never been on stage before. The first thing I tell them is, I will never ask you a question I know you don't already have the answer to. So no need to be nervous. I know you can answer everything I ever ask you. But the less frequent they were on stage, the more likely it becomes a conversation versus an interview. I will take 75% of the conversation if, in fact, that's necessary to move the topic along.
For sure. But
which means you as the moderator / interviewer have to be prepared to moderate your content accordingly.
Correct. But you feed the person that you're feeding the panelist, you're feeding the interviewee as much content as they need to be successful in delivering their responses.
Right.
Sometimes that's 4 words. Right. Fantastic. Talk to me about what you've been doing in AI. Sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes it's 90 seconds to get a 20-second response from them.
Right.
But you took 90 seconds to make sure they give you a really good 20 seconds, not to give them 20 seconds to hand you back the mic. They are still the value and the content, and you are there to help pull the value out, not provide the value.
And sometimes that's the pre-warning to them. I'll say, listen, I know sometimes you need time to think. So my preamble will be slightly longer to give you that think time, so that you're ready when I'm done the 30 seconds to say your 20 seconds.
Right.
Like, I'm going to give you the room, and you just use the room when I give it to you.
So is it that they're afraid that someone else will take the spotlight, or is that they really haven't been trained correctly in that interaction?
Uh,
You mean the CXOs?
Yeah.
Ego.
You see,
I don't think it's only ego.
Yeah. What else do you think?
I mean, I think some of it is they don't know how to frame a quick response that also sounds intelligent and carries all the things they want. Sometimes it's ego, right? And they're trying to get like all of the information out.
Right.
Like that's one that I see. If you're on a panel, you have 30 to 45 seconds for a response, not 2.5 minutes. It's
Right.
boring as hell, and you always seem like an ass.
Right.
Always.
Yeah.
Right? Unless someone is asking you, hey, this thing just happened in the news. Can you break down the legislation from that?
Right. Then
You're probably not going to do it in
longer.
30 seconds to 30 to 45 seconds, right? Okay, cool. You might need 2.5 minutes, but they're setting you up for 2.5 minutes. 99% of the time, 30 to 45 seconds, right? You look like an ass when you give a 5-point response that covers everything that everyone could possibly say, and then you turn to the other panelists and go, well, you're next. Right? Also, I promise you don't look that smart. You just look like an ass.
The worst thing that can happen is if the second or third panelist says, well, I don't have much more to add to that.
Correct.
That's torture. That's torture.
Correct. Well, I mean, there are times. So that happens for one of 2 reasons. One, the question was too narrow.
Right.
Right. And I've had that happen where I've given a 20-second response and the next person goes, well, I don't really have anything to add to what Howard said.
I
And
agree.
you
with
just
that.
go, well, shit. Like that doesn't help me either, right? As a panelist, I want to learn. I really want to argue with you. That's like the gems are being able to go, actually, I disagree. I disagree with what Phil said. I think it's this instead, right? Because if you can get a little back and forth going, a little 20-30-second back and forth, that is so engaging and so interesting.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because the panel that was an academic versus a journalist, I was really hoping for disagree. I was like, this is going to be good, right? Because somebody's going to be a purist and somebody's going to be a realist, and I want to hear this battle in some way, right? And they're probably both right, and both wrong, maybe. But I wanted to hear it. I wanted
Sure.
them to say, sure, you could think of it that way, but that's not how people in the real world actually do things.
Right.
Like, that was just interesting, but that never happened, right? Because it was a lot of CXO ask academic question 1, CXO ask journalist question 2.
Right.
they
Those are
didn't get
terrible
that.
too.
They didn't get to answer the same question. I'm like, well, that wasn't helpful.
No, it's not helpful. It's boring as hell.
Right.
Like I don't even need to look for the conflict, but I really would like 2 perspectives if you have 2 people up there.
Yeah, at the very least.
Right.
Yeah.
Like holy crap, man. Don't go, hey, I've got question 1 for you, I've got question 2 for you. That's 2 different interviews. Why are you having
That's
people
right.
wait through 2 different interviews? That seems like a waste of everybody's time.
That's right. Well, let's just do one at a time then, because
Right.
This is not effective.
Right. I've done those, and they are painful to be a panelist for. Right. Where you're like, ooh, I've got a really good. Oh, I don't. That's right. I don't get to respond to that. That's stupid.
Well, I think that reflecting on that for the audience, if you're actually in a panel, make sure that you add value. If you're the CXO, you're not the shiny object that everybody's looking for. You're there to get the other people and make them look good. Use your influence so then they can shine, and they will make you shine because they were shining. My friends, thank you for joining to the session. Make sure that you share, you subscribe, and we'll see you on our next episode.